Hi everyone, this is Jen from Around the World in 80 Cakes, and today I wanted to share with you some of the methods I use to prep my cake pans so that my cakes come out cleanly every time. So I have just a standard 8-inch round pan right here, and the first thing I want to do is line it with parchment paper. In the beginning, when I first started baking, I didn't always do this step, and I will say that it meant a lot of my cakes didn't unmold very nicely. So I highly recommend lining the bottom of your pans with parchment paper whenever you're baking a layer cake. This obviously doesn't work for things like bundt pans or decorative pans, but any pan that has a flat bottom, round, square, any of those kinds of shapes, you can line it with parchment paper using this method. Make sure you use parchment paper, not wax paper. Wax paper is lined with wax. Parchment is actually lined with silicone, which makes it much better for baking at high temperatures, and it's also much more resistant to moisture, so the wax paper can easily fall apart, but this will stay together. So you want to get yourself parchment paper. I like to use this kind that's non-bleached, and it's actually eco-friendly, but any store brand will do. So I roll out a piece and I lay my pan on top of it. Now this, if you have a pan that is larger than what the parchment paper size is, you can, kind of create two pieces to line the pan with. But for the 8-inch round, I'm just going to line up the pan towards the back edge and the side edge here so that I don't waste any paper. And like I said, you can do this with any shaped pan. And then I'm going to take a pencil and I'm just going to trace around the outside of the pan so that I have a guide to cut with. Just like that. So now I have my guide, and I'm going to cut around this, but on the inside of the pencil mark so that I'm cutting the pencil mark off and it's not ever going to come in contact with my cake. Okay, so I'm all done cutting out my circle. You can kind of see there's no pencil marks there, and it fits really well in the bottom of my pan. But you need to still coat it in some way with some sort of non-stick surface. There's the old, you can grease and flour the pans, but what I actually like to use are these sprays that are meant for baking. So they're actually an oil spray that have a little bit of flour in them. I've had good luck with both of these brands, so whichever you prefer can find in your grocery store, you can try it out. But basically what I would do is shake it up and spray the pan nice and light, try and get the sides. And I use a pastry brush. This is a nice silicone one, so you don't lose any bristles. And I just wipe it around and get a nice even coating so that you don't get up any thick spots of the spray, and get the sides as well as possible. And then lay your parchment circle in, or whatever shape you have, and press it down. And then spray it again so that you get a layer on top of the parchment itself. And then once again use the brush to brush it around. And this is a good time when, if the first time around you didn't get the sides real good, when you spray the parchment, make sure you spray the sides real good as well. Like I said, you don't want it to be too thick because that can also cause problems with the cake. You want a good layer on there, but you want to make sure that it's even and you don't have any big pools of spray kind of sitting in the bottom of the pan. So that's really it for preparing the pan. And then the last trick that I recommend is when you go to fill it, you fill the pan, you usually fill about halfway, tap it on the counter a few times pretty hardly to get any air bubbles out of your batter. And then lastly, you can use these little magical things called cake strips. There are a few brands of these out there. You can buy them online in your craft stores, and they usually look something like this. They have some newer ones that are a little more colorful. But they're fabric strips that are heat resistant, and you soak them in water, and then you wrap them around the pan. And they come with some little clips that let you clip it on. And they have different sizes for all the different pans, but what this does is actually cool down the sides of the cake pan as the cake is baking so that you don't get a dome. So the reason you get a dome is because the sides are baking faster since they're hotter, touching the sides of the pan, and they set faster than the middle of the cake, which continues to rise as it's baking. So by cooling down the sides of the pan with these cake strips, you're going to get a much more evenly level cake, and you won't get that little dome action going on. So like I said, that's how you do it, and then let the cake cool for no more than 10 minutes on a cooling rack so you get good airflow above and below the cake, and then unmold it, loosen the sides a little bit if they're sticking with a spatula, and then unmold it onto a cooling rack, and your cake should come out cleanly and perfectly every time. So that's about it. I hope you found it helpful, and you can always check out my website, www.80cakes.com, for more baking tips and recipes and other videos. Happy baking!